everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe, with me, Emma Turner, and my very special guest who I have been dying to talk to for a very, very long time, the wonderful Emma Sheppard. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's an absolute delight. I've been absolutely desperate to get you on because this is an area in which I am hugely interested, hugely passionate. I just feel that your work has got such reach and impact across the whole sector, all phases, that I kind of wanted to get you on and get you to share your work and your wisdom in this area, which of course is the work of your projects, which I'm not going to
It's a tongue twister, Emma.
Let you introduce it. So if you wanted to sort of speak about your career and your work and where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of a charity called the MTPT project. So that's the tongue twister, the Maternity Teacher Paternity Teacher project. I'm a teacher at heart. I think teacher identity is sticks with you even when you're not in the classroom. So I taught English and with a lead practitioner, and did various other roles with trainees and EAL and research development stuff for 12 years. I trained through Teach First in 2010, did a stint abroad in an international school in Vietnam, and then came back to South London and worked in a big multi-academy trust, Harris Federation, and I founded the MTPT project when I went on maternity leave with my son, Hugo, who's now 8. So it was founded in 2016, and then it grew when I was on leave with Lucy in 2018. And I founded the project really from a personal space. I loved my job. It was a huge part of my identity. It still is, sort of reading, being an English teacher, pedagogy, thinking about planning, being interested in children's development. And when I was pregnant, a lot of the narrative was that I wouldn't even need to think about that when the baby came along, because I'd be too busy, or the baby would completely eclipse every single part of who I was. And I don't think I was very able to fully articulate why that bothered me so much at the time, because I didn't have a mother identity at that point. But now, sort of 8 years in, I think the real thing that grated was the fact that there was the assumption that as women, as mothers, we could only be one-dimensional. So one identity would immediately replace the former identity. So in becoming a mother, I wasn't complex enough as a human being to also continue to be a teacher, or a swimmer, or a change maker, or really good at delivering professional development to other teachers, or somebody who loved nature. I was only going to be mother, and I found it really limiting. So a lot of the project was founded on the sort of refusal to become one-dimensional in the way that society, a lot of the narrative around motherhood in particular, more than fatherhood, sort of tries to shove women into a box.
I'm listening to you and I'm nodding along because very similar thing, very similar point in headship after I'd had my third child, and I met a former colleague, and I've written about this before, and he said, oh, you were always going to be so good, you were always great, you were always this, you were always that. And I suddenly realized that he'd just spoken entirely in the past tense about my professional achievements, as in they had halted on that date, as of becoming a mother, becoming a parent. That was it. Now there was no chance for further development. And I'm with you on this kind of challenging this kind of rather reductive narrative, and rather than parenting and family life becoming an additive element to your skill set and your understanding and your nuance of what education can be and might be. So I just wanted to dig a little deeper into kind of, how did you set up the charity? What did it look like in the beginning, and how did it grow?
Yeah, it actually looked like a blog. So it started as a blog, and then it evolved into a Twitter handle, and then a community. So when I was waiting for Hugo, he was late. It had been May half term. I was expecting, you know, don't know what I was thinking, he'd arrive on the first day of the spring, like summer 2 term. He didn't. Everybody went back to school. Nobody was on holiday anymore, and I was sort of twiddling my thumbs. And I hadn't, since I'd actually been not working when I was in Singapore, I hadn't had a day that was laid out before me where I didn't have a plan or didn't have anything really structured to do. And obviously, when you're 17,000 months pregnant, you don't want to go too far from where you're supposed to actually be delivering the baby. So there's these limitations. And so I thought I'll put myself to good use, and I'll do some learning on Future Learn. They do these sort of MOOCs, they're called, sort of webinar programs. And I completed this EAL program, which was really, really interesting, and was blogging about my reflections on the program. So it began as a blog. Hannah Wilson at Diverse Educators, she was at Women Ed at the time, encouraged me to create a Twitter handle. I didn't know what I was doing really, but, you know, sent the first tweet and felt like an idiot. And then that gained some traction. And then it eventually grew into a community of people who were sort of agreeing with some of the things that I was saying, enjoying reading the blog. I think I created a website when Hugo was about 4 months old, whilst I was on leave, and started collating case studies for the website. So it was really sort of storytelling and experience sharing and human connection at the beginning. And then it wasn't until I was about to go back to work in 2017 that I started collecting research, because some colleagues at Teach First, a lady called Gina, who's now at the Fair Education Alliance, was saying, if this is your hunch, then you need the research to back you up in terms of women being lost to the workforce, teacher workforce, because of the motherhood penalty. So at that point, I started sort of joining the dots between the various research pieces. There were an enormous amount of gaps that I filled over the course of 2 years, really. And into my second maternity leave with Lucy. And, you know, as the movement grows, as you get more followers, as you get people who disagree with you, and then you have to problem solve to sort of explore that conversation, as you get people who share different sort of nuances of their experience, and then the conversation grows more. And we introduced coaching programs around 2018. We piloted them and then launched them properly in 2019. And things sort of just grew from there. So we got charity status in 2020, and had a small board of trustees who got us off the ground. And then as a charity, there's various things that you have to do to be tick boxes for charity stuff. So we had to grow our trustee board to do that. And yeah, it sort of just keeps growing organically. And that was really helpful for me whilst I was still working full-time, because I had 2 small children, working full-time in a challenging secondary school, and had this sort of side hustle, as it were. And it wouldn't grow unless I responded to it. And the more I responded to it, the more it grew, until essentially I had a conversation with my head teacher and said I'd like to go down to 4 days a week, not because, not what you're expecting. So not because I want to spend time with my precious children, because I do spend time with my precious children at the weekend, and that's exhausting, and for 24 hours a day during the holidays, and that's also exhausting. But what is really evident is that I don't have any time for myself, because I'm trying to squeeze all my commitments into 24 hours in a day that we just don't have. So I'm trying to attend to my children, attend to my husband, attend to my house, attend to my students, attend to my leadership responsibilities, attend to the MTPT project community, and I just there isn't enough time. So I reduced my my days at school to 4 days a week, and did 1 day a week on the MTPT project. And then after the pandemic, my husband said he is French. He said, I can't do this anymore. Britain is grey and gloomy, and I want to go home. And I said, all right. And we relocated to France in 2021, and that meant that I wasn't working full time, so I had all the time to dedicate to the MTPT project, and it's grown monumentally since I've been able to give it that attention.
That's such a beautiful story, kind of literally from kind of the very small beginnings of just putting that Twitter handle out there to an absolutely huge and massively impactful community, because I don't know whether you've actually ever sat and thought about the kind of the ripple effect that your work has created. Because I speak to so many people who've attended your coaching or who have connected with the community, and then the impact that that's had on their lives, and then the role modeling that that sets up for other people in their organization or their setting. So it's an absolutely beautiful story to think about how that's grown and the ripple effects that that's created. And you mentioned earlier about the motherhood penalty and about losing people, because one of the things when you were talking I was thinking about was the fact that it's almost like there's all these wonderful stars out there in education, all these glittering talented people, and your community kind of sewing them together in these beautiful constellations. But I really wanted to kind of, for people who don't know it, and there are lots of people out there who still don't understand some of the figures about the demographics and who's leaving and why they're leaving. So I just wondered if you could kind of give us a little bit more information, background about the motherhood penalty and about the demographic that this work is affecting the most.
So I think really important to define exactly what the term the motherhood penalty means, because it can be misconstrued, and it has been in various social media sort of toxic backlashes with organisations who are doing brilliant work like Pregnant Then Screwed. So the motherhood penalty is a sociological term coined, cannot remember her name, that's terrible, but there's an American sociologist who coined this term as part of her research, and it refers to the penalties that mothers face in the workplace, or that women face in the workplace when they become mothers. So it's not to do with, like, you know, just the general being a mother is really hard and we're really ungrateful for our children, because no, obviously our children are the most precious thing, and the fact that I even have to say that is kind of ridiculous, right? But it's evident to any parent in the world that yes, our children are the most precious. Even that is not necessarily the case, you know, considering some of the students and the families that we have worked with, but the majority of parents would say their children are the most precious thing in the world. However, the motherhood penalty is specifically focused on the pay penalties that women suffer when they become parents, the reduction in hours that come with balancing domestic and professional responsibilities that then have penalties around progression and pay. It's to do with limited occupational mobility. So that means essentially your professional movement is limited. So mothers are less likely to commute further afield for jobs because their geographical sphere is limited by the drop-off, the emergency childcare, the dentist, the grocery shopping, because women still take on far more of the domestic load than men in our society in the UK, arguably globally. So the motherhood penalty describes this phenomenon of penalties that women suffer when they become mothers in the workplace because of the impact of the domestic load of motherhood. So that's what the motherhood penalty is. And we see it in the measures of, in the education, well, across all sectors, but in the education sector, we see it in the measures of teacher attrition, gender equality at leadership level, and the gender pay gap. So those are the sort of core evidence of, yes, the motherhood penalty is happening here. So if you look at a couple of those factors, women aged 30 to 39 are the largest demographic to leave teaching every year, and they have been since 2017. So we lose more women in that age bracket than we do of people who retire. We know that the gender pay gap increases most significantly between the age of 35 to 39 at all levels, so headship, leadership, classroom teacher. And actually at primary classroom teacher level, women out-earn men slightly until 35 to 39, when they lose out again. And female teachers are more likely to become mothers slightly later than the national average. So our guesstimate around there from some of the surveys that we've done is first-time motherhood is around 34 for teachers, average. National average is 30, and that tallies with sort of education level, because pretty much every single teacher is educated to degree level, and the higher education level, the older the age of first-time motherhood on average. So the motherhood penalty is an action in the gender pay gap. And when we look at women in leadership level, so we know that women are disproportionately underrepresented at leadership level. So 76% of our teacher workforce are women, but only 60% of our, 60% of our head teachers are female. And that's about 40% at secondary level. So, you know, even worse. And a really interesting stat from a Marianne Coleman report, fairly old one, 2006, I think, is that 90% of male head teachers are fathers, but only 60% of female head teachers are mothers. So it's easier to be a father and a head teacher than it is a mother and a head teacher. So again, you're seeing that motherhood penalty coming out at leadership level as well. You're more likely to meet a female head teacher who does not have children than you are to meet a male head teacher who does not have children. So those are the statistics. But what's also really, really interesting, and that came out in our Missing Mothers report, which I hope to get a chance to talk about a little bit later, is that actually there's this huge dichotomy in those figures, because 27% of our teacher workforce are also women aged 30 to 39. So not only do they leave in huge numbers, they're actually our largest sort of cornerstone of our workforce as well. So we have more women aged 30 to 39 working in education than we have of men entirely put together. It's like 26% of our workforce, 24% of our workforce are men. So something's keeping women in the workforce in this age bracket. Some schools must be doing it very, very right. Teaching must be an incredibly family-friendly or mother-friendly career, because they're staying, right? They're staying in huge numbers. So there's this sort of dichotomy in the stats. And when you look closer, though, they stay, but they stagnate. They stay and they thrive because of the ecosystems that are around them, i.e. really positive and supportive school communities, or they stay because of personal circumstances that mean that they're able to balance family commitments. So they have family close by, or their partner is able to be an equal parent, or you know, the logistics of their childcare for whatever reason makes sense. Or they stay because they've reached a point in their career where the financial sacrifice of retraining or leaving is not something that they can afford to do in another industry. So they'd rather remain in a profession, even if it's challenging, than not be able to pay their childcare bills, not be able to pay their mortgage, not be able to have the lifestyle that they enjoy because of the financial rewards of teaching.
And that bracket, losing that bracket is terrifying, because if you look at it in terms of, rather than just age, but potential length of service, they are your experienced colleagues. They are the people who can do an assembly at the drop of a hat, or who can deal with a really complicated safeguarding issue, or teach a really challenging class, or support and mentor your younger or less experienced colleagues. So when these people leave, when these women leave, they take with them so much professional wisdom that is really, really hard to replace. And I think sometimes when we just look at it in terms of age, and the fact that there's quite a plethora of people in that demographic, we say, oh, there's plenty more. But actually, if you look at it in terms of professional wisdom lost, I think it's terrifying to think that that's the bracket you're losing across the sector.
Mm. And it is really interesting, just a couple of points to pull out of that reflection. You're absolutely right. And we talk about the Jenga metaphor. We talk about teacher supply as a Jenga tower. And our focus right now, our national focus, our schools, our regional focus is build up and up and up, recruit, recruit, recruit. We get panicked and upset about the fact that we're not meeting our recruitment targets. Jack Worth at the NFAR gives us his tables every year, and there's sort of little purple bar charts, and we all get upset because we've got no physics teachers and we've got too many PE teachers. Our national narrative is around recruitment. So build up the Jenga tower. And actually, you know, you've got people maybe standing on the sidelines, or people who have the space to look and see and are not sort of, you know, in the melee of the panic, who are looking at the bottom bricks and thinking, oh my goodness, somebody's going to push that brick. Somebody is going to push that brick and the whole tower is going to fall down. And it's almost like when you're watching sort of your toddlers playing Jenga for the first time, and as the mom, you're like, you can push that. If that's the brick you're choosing, go for it. but go for if you really want to. And it's sort of like, don't push that brick. And then the tower falls down. So our experienced teachers being those stabilizing bricks at the bottom that enable us to build up. And if we are removing bricks from that bottom, we have to be strategic about it. Otherwise, the whole thing falls down. So that's the sort of first reflection, 100%. When we lose these women, we lose all the things that you described, which takes time and money to replace. And we can't replace that experience at the pace that we are losing it. And that's part of the reason that we have such instability in our schools, because when we have conversations about SEN, when we have conversations about teaching and learning or attendance or behaviour, we cannot have those conversations without considering who it is that is delivering that practice or those strategies or those programs. And if the people delivering those strategies or programs are young and inexperienced, then or overworked because everybody has left, then of course those strategies are going to be lacking. You know, we talk about looking after students and putting them first, but actually, if we want to do that, we need to put the staff first because they're the ones delivering for the students, right? So there's that. But also when you listed all the brilliant things that are sort of distilled in that 30 to 39 demographic, actually one phenomena that we've seen that pushes women to attrition, particularly in the very early years they're coming back from maternity leave, is the over-reliance on them because they are the ones that have that experience. So as strong as a professional colleague is, if they're coming back from maternity leave and they've got their part-time request, yes, you absolutely work 3 days a week as a senior leader because we want you back and we value you hugely. Because we value you hugely, we really need you to teach we need you to share every single one of your classes because you're working part-time. We need you to do that across 14 different rooms in the school with no permanent base. We need you to take on the most difficult exam classes so that we get results. And we need you to take the pressure that's associated with that. We also need you to take on your full leadership responsibility without any sort of pro rata or job sharing, because we don't have anybody who knows the system as much as you do. By the way, we also need you to be on duty, and there's a safeguarding issue that's happening at this time, which has a huge emotional load. So we also need you to teach outside of your subject, and please can you cover? So as much as these women can do that, when they are in that very early transition period of going home to no sleep, to guilt, to a demanding baby, to a domestic load that they are more likely to take on the bulk of than their male partners. They, after a long time out, managing a completely new working schedule, if they've reduced their hours to part-time, it's too much. And people say, I can't do this. And I feel bad for not being able to do this because everybody thinks I should be able to do this. And I think I should be able to do this, but I can't and I don't want to. So it's interesting. There has to be that almost grace period or conversation with those leaders is, if you want to perform in this way, or if we need you to perform in this way, what else do we need to do differently at this particular point in your life so that that doesn't break you because you've now got something at home that is poking you in the eye at 4 o'clock in the morning.
I'm having a flashback, Emma, to crying on the phone to my mum after my first baby, shouting, sort of crying, how can I run a whole school and I can't run a baby, mum? Why is this not working? Why is she not sleeping? Why is she... And then having to get up and go into work and run an entire organisation looking super slick and super together, and actually thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through till 4 o'clock today because I've not slept properly for however long. It's a real, that transition period when you're adjusting to life as a new parent while still trying to be this person that you were before. I don't think anybody can underestimate the impact on that. It's a short period of your life, but my goodness me, it's an intense one.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because again, it's a very complicated and individualized conversation to have with colleagues, because I remember coming back after my first leave and being, really encouraged not to take on anything extra and to go home early and to, not burden myself. And the intention was positive, but I was hugely frustrated because I was like, I'm paying for nursery from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock. I don't need to go home at 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, I can do all the things that are required of me. So, but I need to know them so that I can plan my day, plan my week. Please don't take responsibility away from me. I will watch somebody else do it in a way that's not as good as I could do it and be frustrated. And that will hugely limit my CV and my progression in the future. So don't take things away from me. Just help me when I am struggling, offer me support, offer me flexibility, encourage me that I don't need to feel guilty if I do need to take a day off to look after my child here and there, because actually some of the things that I needed, they couldn't help with. You know, I needed sleep. I desperately needed sleep when I came back after my first maternity leave, and I didn't have that. I desperately needed family support at the weekend, and because of our geographical location, we didn't have that necessarily. And those were things that work couldn't help with. What I wanted at work was to feel like I was doing a great job, because sometimes it felt like I was doing an awful job at home.
That the guilt monkey is, whenever you're at home, you think you should be doing work. Whenever you're at work, you should think you should be doing home. And you have to make your peace with the guilt monkey, don't you? Like, it doesn't matter where you are, you're always going to feel like you're in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. But that brings me on to this idea of the work that your organization does to support the parent at the point of transition from becoming a new parent and coming back to work, but then also the training and development that school leaders can engage with to facilitate that transition and to provide the support and the systems around that member of staff. So what's the kind of offer or suite of resources that you use with colleagues in both of those situations?
Yeah, so we have a sort of a cradle to school coaching offer, essentially, for colleagues when they become parents. So when they become parents, they can have coaching, one-to-one or group coaching whilst they are on leave. We have a one-off return to work workshop that happens just before they go back. And then we have one-to-one or group coaching over the immediate return to work period, so the first year of return, and then what we call the extended period, so up until the youngest child, because obviously this isn't something that just happens once. You know, that was my period of parental leave and becoming a working parent. This is something that, I mean, in your case, Emma, it's happened 3 times. You know, we've got colleagues within the community who have 5 children. So, you know, this could be a period of 15 years in a colleague's life, getting the youngest child into school. And it's that 1 to 5 years where women in particular are at most vulnerable of dropping out of the workforce because of the competing logistics. So we offer that coaching support and that return to work workshop for the individuals. But actually, you know, we can coach them and empower them and help them to find, you know, what is the best option for them. But if the workplaces are not keeping up with that in terms of understanding the complexity of the environment, then unfortunately we're coaching people to be so empowered that they're leaving their workplaces because their workplaces aren't meeting their expectations. And it's a real turnaround from talking to colleagues who come to us sort of later in their journey. So they come to us when their children are 2-3 years old and they didn't have that support previously. And they talk about school communities that are, you know, really challenging, really unsupportive, don't have even, you know, the basics in place. We've had, you know, horror stories of people being told that they can breastfeed in a cupboard or breastfeed in a toilet or express in order to continue their breastfeeding journey. We're still getting sort of the most simple flexible working requests denied, or flexible working being granted on the proviso that people step down from their leadership positions. We're still hearing of people being asked to go in to deliver parents' evenings on their days off, rather than having that pro-rated according to their working hours, or even colleagues who have to stay for parents' evening even though they don't have a class for that particular parents' evening. So this really just silly working practice, because it's directed time and everybody has to do it, so it's not fair if they get to go home, right? So they have to sit in their room marking, which causes huge problems for childcare and dinner time and bedtime and etc. So yeah, we hear some of this terrible practice, but sometimes when we catch them earlier and we coach them, they sort of spend 2 terms in that and say, oh, I'm better than this. I am, my coach has taken me through. We've talked about inner critic. We've talked about my values. We've talked about what I want from my career. We've talked about the difficult conversations that I can prepare myself for, and negotiating and compromise, and, my 10-year plan. And this is not it, but that school is. And so they move schools, or they say, I don't think it's achievable in education, and so they leave and they find something even better that fills their cup, because their coach has supported them to know what a full cup feels like. So if the schools aren't, one, aware of what the law is around pregnancy and maternity as a protected characteristic and sex as a protected characteristic, acting on that, and actually delivering training or support at line manager level. This is where we see the biggest instances of discrimination that sort of snowballs out of control, is where heads of department or immediate line managers don't know what they're doing. So in performance reviews, for example, signing off on a performance review to say that no progression will be awarded because that colleague has been on maternity leave, that is illegal, completely illegal, because women will lose out when they become mothers in a way that other colleagues who are not part of that protected characteristics will not lose out. Whoever their assistant, normally it's an assistant head or a deputy head that's signing off on those performance reviews, doesn't know that they're not allowed to do that. And then somebody clicks onto it because tell them at a return to work workshop, they get in touch with their union, and then the school has to deal with a whole load of union issues and back pay issues. And I mean, that's one example of many of the fine details, the nuts and bolts, that if leaders are not informed about this huge demographic, pregnancy and maternity, and then sex, they're just, one, losing staff, two, making staff suffer, and three, putting themselves into a whole load of hassle that they could otherwise avoid.
So if a school's potentially listening to this, or they're in a space where they're thinking, we really want to be proactive and to tighten up all of our approaches to this, to really think and analyse about what we're doing, how can you and the project support them?
Yeah, so we have a program for that, and we are so solutions focused as an organization. Literally, we are very research based, and the minute we identify an issue, we create a program for it. We create the training, we create the development, we plug the gap with a resource of some sort. And there are very few issues around this topic that we don't have a program for. So we have a program called Life Friendly Leadership. It runs as a live cohort in November, starting in November and starting in April. And it's a 5-session program that is a real deep dive into pregnancy and maternity and sex, and also has some overlap with sexual orientation as protected characteristic. So we focus on parents, but there are a number of demographics that are sort of looked after by that program, and we explore all sorts of things from the pregnancy and maternity period to inclusive policies, so looking at things like fertility treatment and leave for fertility treatment, experiences of fathers and non-birthing partners, what adoption and surrogacy looks like and how policies should match up. We look at the injustices of, women as a right are entitled to all of their antenatal appointments paid. They can't be refused those antenatal appointments, but fathers and non-birthing partners get 2 unpaid opportunities to attend antenatal appointments. So from the very word go, our policy documents are saying this is the important parent, and you're just, bonus parent, cheerleader if you want. So sort of creating unequal parenting in the workplace from the word go. We look at the sort of workforce, some of the statistics, the argument, sort of the why behind doing this work, and we look at the immediate return to work period. And then we look at whole school policies, so things like what does your cover arrangements look like? What do your planning arrangements look like to enable absence? How punitive are your absence policies, and what do your performance management meetings look like? So all sorts of things about the general running of the school that have a specific impact on that early parenting period.
Because it's such a patchwork of approaches across the country, and I in some of the work that I do, I have some trusts or local authorities or individual schools or organisations who are really flying the flag for this and are absolutely miles ahead. And then I work with other organisations and I feel like I've gone back in time. I feel like I'm in some kind of weird Jurassic parental period where there's been absolutely no progress and it's just a flat no. So if colleagues are working in organisations where they are meeting with that flat no, or completely outdated processes and policies that make them feel that they can't progress, or they're not being listened to, they're not being heard, how do they make contact with you? How do they, because I know that you've got regional leads, haven't you?
Yeah, so we have a wonderful team of regional representatives who the primary aim is that they host a WhatsApp group and they build community within their local regions. So if there are any sort of local questions about schools or about places to visit or about different practices across their region, or opportunities, professional development or networking opportunities, there's a sort of touch point for that locale. But our regional representatives also do lots of other things. They come on podcasts like this. They go on the BBC for us when we covered our Missing Mothers report. They deliver training events. They write articles. They do all sorts of things. An amazing group of people, and they do all of that as volunteers on top of their paid teaching roles or their paid roles in other industries. A couple of them are colleagues who have left teaching for exactly the reasons we've talked about and are now sort of saying, I'd like to be part of the solution, even though I'm not teaching anymore. But the easiest way to get in touch with us directly is through our email address, mtpt project@gmail.com. We also have a website, mtpt.org.uk, that has a contact form. We're on LinkedIn, so you can either search my name, Emma Sheppard, P-P-A-R-D, there's many ways to spell it, or the MTPT project, Maternity Teacher Paternity Teacher project. And we're also on Instagram at MTPT project. So they're the platforms that we use. And I suppose there's the difficult thing is that there's an easy way and a hard way to deal with that situation, that sort of back in time Jurassic situation that you've described. The easy way is to know that there are schools out there that are not like that. So connect with our community, go to open evenings, talk to colleagues about their schools, present your cover letter to a school near you that you want to work at, even if you're not seeing any vacancies advertised. Describe exactly what you want in terms of working hours or the role or the responsibility with your experience, because it saves a great deal of time for schools if they're like, oh, you know, we have an emergency in terms of a teacher vacancy and we've got somebody who wants to work at our school with the right experience or with a potentially matching experience. So, you know, jump ship is the simple terms. Go where the grass is greener. Don't suffer. But a lot of people are not in that situation. They are tied to a particular area because of their childcare or their mortgage or their family support or their partner's job, or they're relocating to areas because of those reasons. Or the vacancies aren't coming up in the schools that they want to because they're great schools and teacher turnover is low. Or, you know, there are other reasons why taking a risk and starting somewhere new is maybe not what they want when they're dealing with a whole load of change in their personal lives. So that's the poignancy of it, because those are the teachers that are most likely to stagnate and have a sort of slow attrition from the workforce or just end up very disillusioned. But then there's a sort of third category there of the people who can't move, don't want to move, and have the energy to fight the system. And that's where we can support as well, because we can get you trained up on our life-friendly leadership program. We can offer you coaching to support you when it's really difficult. We can give you a community of people who, when you say, oh, my school, this is the practice currently, will go, that's ridiculous, look at this link, this is what I did in my school, we had a similar situation, I have a friend that I can put you in contact with. Networks and communities are so powerful for that, because on days when you think it's too hard, they're probably right, I'm not worth anything, if you have somebody that can say, you are amazing, you are doing the right thing, it is difficult, think about all the people that you are supporting, it will be amazing in the long run, keep going, you're brilliant, have a glass of wine, go to the gym, whatever it is, have a cup of coffee, whatever it is that floats your boat. can just give you that boost that you need to keep going. But sometimes the change will not happen unless there is somebody fighting for it within the system. But the tricky thing with our audience is that the people who are fighting for it often are the ones who have first-hand experience of it at the point of return, when they are tired and they are emotional and they are overburdened. And so they're then taking on something even more challenging at a time in their life when, you know, their resources are already depleted. So for anybody listening who knows somebody like that in their life and thinking, oh yeah, they managed to get that policy changed, or they were a role model, or they were the first person to work at that level flexibly or part-time, or they're parenting out loud, or he was the first person to take shared parental leave or to work part-time as a man in the system. Those people are doing that whilst also doing 100 other things at home, and very, very, very tired and potentially hormonal as well.
The accidental activist sometimes, isn't it, where you end up fighting the system or fighting your corner when you are so tired. But actually sometimes, and I know from speaking to lots of people, that that's actually the thing that's given them the courage to, I don't mean not care, but they are almost so tired, I've just got to do something. I cannot carry on
like this. Yeah.
I cannot carry on like this, so I have to speak up. And I'm just casting my mind over the kind of list of, I'll call them graduates, people who have been through your programs, and I think about the very, very senior positions and roles they're now performing in within the education sector. And I really smile at that, because I'm thinking that your work and was the springboard and often the catalyst for them being able to carry on doing the work that they love and making such a big difference. So your alumni is amazing as well.
And you know what? So again, two things. One, people don't realize that a lot of the huge figures that they can see in education, or, you know, their school leaders, you know, have overcome a lot of the challenges that we have spoken about. You know, and they're not known as, oh yes, you know, they are a senior leader in education or doing this great job and they are a mum. They're just known for being Jenny Webb, who is an amazing sort of literacy specialist and now runs, you know, literacy projects, being Kat Howard, who is a, you know, amazing trust leader now and doing all sorts of things, being Katie Dallander, who runs the East Manchester Teaching School Hub. You know, there are all these women who are just doing their jobs really well, not in the way that I'm doing it, of being, you know, the baby person in education, or you know, being the flexible working person in education, or being the equal parental leave person in education. They are just doing their jobs really, really well. So that's the first thing. You know, they're not necessarily defined by their identity as mothers. They are defined by the fact that they are absolutely cracking at what they do. And then the other thing there is, lost my train of thought. You might have to edit this bit out. What was the other thing there?
Alumni, not being defined, big names.
Big names in education. Oh yes, okay. The other thing is that those women would have done what they're doing anyway. They would have done. They didn't need me or the MTPT project to get them there. They would have just had a more difficult time or less encouragement to do it, and they maybe wouldn't feel as empowered to parent so brazenly and openly and sort of publicly and say, I am doing this and I am also, you know, a parent, and that identity is as important to me as my professional role. So they would have done that anyway. And the beauty of being an organisation that is underpinned by coaching is that we truly, truly, truly believe that it's not us. It's not us that's doing anything. It is making room for voice, making room for thought, making room to ask, what do you want? Not what should I be doing, or what am I being told to do, or what do I feel guilty about because I'm not doing it? What do you want and how are you going to get it? And then everything else comes from the person being coached, that amazing individual that is standing in front of us with vomit everywhere and, you know, hair in a messy bun and, you know, on 4 hours sleep. And what do you want? And sometimes that is, right now I want to eat cake and go back to bed, and other times it's, I want to sign up for that PhD, or I want to take that promotion. And and even sometimes it's, I want to step down from my leadership position because life is too short, and I really love teaching, and I really love gardening, and I really love being at home with my family. So, you know, whatever is the want.
But providing that space for conversation, which leads to personal kind of satisfaction, with whether that be professional, personal, is such important work. And when I think about the people that you've supported and enabled them to have that voice in that space, it's a testament to the brilliant work that you do. There's one last thing. We're running out of time. We're getting really close to time, and I don't want Luke to shout at me because I'm on my own, and I don't want my producer to tell me off for overrunning, but I don't think we can not talking about the missing mothers work just before we wrap up. So if you could kind of just give us the headlines of that work and how you're involved with that.
Yeah. So Miss Mother's report is a report that came out in the summertime. It's a collaboration between the MTPT project and a think tank called the New Britain Project, which is run by an amazing lady called Emma Sheppard, who's also mother of 4. And what do you do when you're bored on maternity leave? 3rd time round, well, you do an MBA, and then the 4th time round, you know, set up your think tank. So she is incredible, and we were having conversations back in 2020 when she was working for another think tank about a previous research project that I'd done when I was on maternity leave with Lucy, that it never really had a name, but I am now calling it Doing the Washing Up Badly because of the way that things have panned out. So essentially, Public First were, no, they were the Policy Exchange. Policy Exchange published a series of essays with a broken orange pencil on the front, and a chap called Jonathan Simons at the time pointed to the bulge in levers aged 30 to 39 with the obvious assumption that it was maternity related. And that was the first time that I'd seen anything in writing that was saying, you know, motherhood penalties, obviously. And then went down into the references and was expecting to see this huge study around the motherhood penalty in education, but it wasn't. It was just the school's workforce census data. And there was no other research behind this figure. And that's why we talk about this idea of being missing completely from the conversation. If I'm not sitting at a roundtable event about sort of workforce, it's highly unlikely that anybody uses the word mother or maternity leave or motherhood penalty or parenting. I'm almost always the first person that goes, that's because of the motherhood penalty, that would be the mothers that are leaving, better maternity transition will probably help there. We need to keep those experienced teachers who are mothers, because nobody talks about it, completely missing from the conversation. So I did this enormous research project in 2018 because nobody else wanted to do it. And all the PhD supervisors I spoke to said that it wasn't a priority or a focus for them within their educational research. So again, just, you know, how to tell on a group of people that they're just not worth anything repeatedly. And it was the first research project that had been done into that demographic. It was enormous. We got 1,000 survey responses, and we did about just over 70 qualitative interviews between a team of 3 of us. And I called it Doing the Washing Up Badly because I'm not a think tank. I'm not a PhD student. I've got a master's that I scraped to pass in because my methodology was poor. And so I was very frank through the whole process of, I'm doing this because nobody's doing it. But just like if you do the washing up badly, somebody will come and be aghast at how terribly it's been done and do it all over again for you, right? And then you'll never be asked to do the washing up again. So Anna did the washing up for me again, properly. In the earlier part of this year, and goes to show how things can be done properly. I started the research study in 2018 and I still haven't finished writing up the findings. Anna got in contact with me, I think in maybe February, and got us on the BBC in August with this amazing report. So the 2024 Missing Mothers report is a reiteration of a similar but evolved survey that we did back in 2018. Anna conducted the interviews in a similar vein that I did. We had a greater focus on flexibility, and we had a greater focus on pandemic, essentially, and the post-pandemic impact. And that's because the world has moved on since 2018, and there have been great improvements in flexible working, and it's been far more part of the agenda in education, and obviously the bright sides that being in lockdown offered us in terms of spending more time with our children and being able to be a part of their growth, and have some, quality time with them, had a huge impact on choices and values going forwards, in the workforce. So yeah, we whipped it out. Its findings were very similar in terms of why teachers are leaving the profession. Workload tops the bill, but then you've got factors like incompatible childcare logistics, lack of flexible working opportunities, and then some really stark figures like only 27% of the women who left were happy with their maternity transition support. Only 38% of the women who'd stayed were happy with their maternity transition support from their school, which is, why we're saying that they can be supported whilst they're on leave through us as a community, but if they're not being supported by their school when they come back, then it will still contribute to them deciding to leave eventually. So we had some great recommendations coming out of the report. There were recommendations about equalising and improving parental leave and pay, and the fact that maternity pay for teachers is actually quite poor in comparison to other degree or graduate professions was picked up on by the BBC. That was their main focus over the summer. But the sort of equalising argument is gaining traction in other industries. We've just had the Dad Shift redo the statue campaign that Pregnant and Screwed did up in Liverpool a couple of years ago, and that's gained really fantastic attention on the media. We are fully funded maternity transition support in terms of coaching and workshops. There's a focus on women in leadership positions. There is a focus on refinements to flexible working, and also a recommendation around increasing logistical and financial access to childcare support for teachers, because the incompatibility of the start and the end of the school day with the start and the end of nursery opening or wraparound care, and the lack of availability of those two things and the cost of those two things is a real challenge for professions like teaching, where there isn't necessarily that flexibility. If you have to be on gate duty at 7:15 in the morning, then that's part and parcel of your role. Even if you can, flex that a little bit, if that's part of your role as a senior leader, then how can you be on gate duty at 7:15 in the morning and also get your own child to school if you don't have somebody at home to support you to do that? If you've got parents' evening that runs until 10, no parents' evenings run to 10. If you've got parents' evening, what sort of parents' evening have I been to? If you've got school shows, that run on until 10, okay, there we go. Then, who is collecting your child from school and depositing them at the babysit, so childcare is a really tricky one. It's going to be interesting to see how Labour's plan to open up primary school classrooms as nursery sites will impact teachers in particular, having their children right next door. So yeah, those were the recommendations that came up the report.
So it's a potentially positive landscape then going forward. There's been...
Yeah. I am hopeful. I am constantly optimistic.
Otherwise, ever the optimist, Emma.
I'm very much solutions focused and optimistic, and I think we've been around for 8 years now. We're not going anywhere. There is work to do, and we will do the work because I've decided that we'll do the work, and because it needs to be done. I believe in the education system. I believe in our teachers, but I also believe that we're not being served, either of those groups, as well as we could be, because we're not paying attention to the needs of working parents, working mothers in particular. So this year is an exciting year. Political shifts have made it more hopeful, I think, and we're definitely going to grab it with both hands and take as many opportunities as we can.
I'm excited to hear about the next steps. We are out of time, and I literally could talk to you all afternoon. I say this to lots of guests, but I genuinely could talk to you for hours about this and dig into it, but we're going to have to wrap it up there. Before we go though, Emma, I just wanted to sort of say, on behalf of the bumps, the babies, the parents, the schools, the children who are in schools, just thank you for the work that you and the organisation do to keep people in the profession, to allow people to grow and to develop and to provide that support and coaching and that space for people to breathe and think about what's important to them. So thank you on behalf of everybody for the work you do, and best of luck. And I shall be following the work of the project with avid interest as you go forward. So thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck with everything going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Mind the Gap. I'm Emma Turner, and I've been presenting with my co-host John Hutchinson. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review, share on social media, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on our YouTube channel by searching Mind the Gap with John and Emma, or head over to Spotify for an audio version. This podcast was produced in association with Haringey Education Partnership, and our producer is Luke Kemper.